Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Continuing with Canto 2, Chapter 7. This is the second session for Chapter 7. So we have discussed the first 25 verses, correct? Or 26. Yeah, we were discussing the Leela Avataras in this chapter, and we have been seeing the flow from the 5th chapter onwards. Just to recap, a quick summary of what we have discussed till now. This is a continuation, or this is a continuation of the conversation between Narad Muni and Lord Brahma. Right? Narad Muni asked some questions in the 5th chapter, start of 5th chapter, first 8 texts. And after that, it's Lord Brahma responding with the creation, with the Purushavasaras specifically, where the Lord engages with his Maya Shakti. And now he's speaking about the incarnations of the Lord, where the Lord is engaging with this Chit potency, his spiritual potency, his internal potency, Chit Shakti. And this chapter, this is the breakup which we saw last time. So first 39 verses is the Leela Avataras, the list of Leela Avataras. Then 40 and 41 is where Lord Brahma will say that although I have listed all these Leela Avataras, but it's impossible to completely describe the glories of the Lord and understand the glories of the Lord also. But it can be understood to some extent by his surrendered devotees. So he gives the details in 40 to 46, and he also lists basically a list of those devotees who have understood the Lord to some extent, and we should follow in their footsteps. 47 to 49 will be discussion about Brahman and Paramatma in relation to Bhagavan. Till now, in this chapter, we have been discussing about the Supreme Lord. So how is Brahman and Paramatma fit into this picture? Text 50 is a summary of all these 3 chapters, 5, 6 and 7. So this is according to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. It's a small verse, but then it encapsulates all the understandings that we have gathered from these 3 chapters, 5, 6 and 7. And finally, Lord Brahma gives order to Narad Muni to preach this message of Srimad Bhagavatam and invoke devotion in all for Lord Hari. Okay, so this is basically an instruction, or you can say a command that's given to Narad Muni to propagate the disciplic succession. Okay, Lord Brahma has received the knowledge from the Supreme Lord himself, from Krishna. Now he has conveyed that knowledge, he has transferred that knowledge to Narad Muni, and now it's Narad Muni's, he has to follow the order of Lord Brahma. It is his responsibility to preach this message of Srimad Bhagavatam all over the world and invoke devotion in all. So this is basically the message of the parampara. So Krishna, then Brahmaji, then Narada, then Vyasa, Madhvacharya, like this. So it's always this way. So spiritual master's order is that his disciple should understand, gain that knowledge, realize that knowledge, and then preach that, so that the transcendental parampara or the purpose of this creation is fulfilled. So in last class we discussed what is the purpose of creation. So the purpose of creation is fulfilled not just by Lord Brahma's creating this material world, but by propagating the transcendental knowledge. So Lord Brahma does 2 activities. We saw that in one of the purports. If you remember, one is creation itself, the Visarga that he does after the Lord's creation of Sarga, and the second is when he propagates the Vedic literatures. Do you remember this? We saw that in the 6th chapter, I think. Okay. It's there in the purport. So these are the 2 things. And of these 2, the second responsibility is actually the most important, the most prominent, where the purpose of creation is fulfilled by propagating the transcendental knowledge, by propagating the cult of devotional service, as Prabhupada used to say. Okay. So we will continue with the incarnations. But now we are not going to see the incarnation, but the Supreme Lord himself who comes. Okay. So this is text 26. We have discussed till 25 in the last session. So we'll continue 26 and it will go on till 39. And the next 10 verses from 26 to 35 will be talking about the pastimes of Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada will speak about specific aspects of his pastimes, specific points he will cover. Okay. So maybe you can concentrate on these 10 verses and what all specific points Srila Prabhupada covers with respect to the personality of Krishna. Okay, it will be very important. So, when the world is overburdened by the fighting strength of kings who have no faith in God, the Lord, just to diminish the distress of the world, descends with his plenary portion. The Lord comes in his original form with beautiful black hair, and just to expand his transcendental glories, he acts extraordinarily. No one can properly estimate how great he is. So Srila Prabhupada writes, the Lord is omnipotent and he expands himself in innumerable forms and energies, and the whole unit is known as the one supreme Brahman. Okay, means the absolute truth. The Lord is omnipotent and he expands himself in innumerable forms and energies. And the whole unit, so the Lord, along with his innumerable forms and expansions of his energies, this whole unit is known as the absolute truth. So even the living entity is part of the absolute truth. The material energy, the spiritual potency, and all the infinite amount of energies that the Lord has, everything is part of that one absolute truth. So that way, there is nothing else but Krishna. Okay. But individually speaking, from Tattva point of view, there is Krishna and his expansions who are all different Tattvas. There is Shakti Tattva, there is Jiva Tattva. So they are all individuals. But in one sense, because the Jiva Tattva is also an expansion of Krishna, and his Shakti is also an expansion of his own energy, they belong to him. So that way, there is nothing else but Krishna. Okay, so this is, we are not speaking from the Mayavadi point of view, but we have to understand it in that way, that this absolute truth means it includes everything. It includes both the material realm as well as the spiritual realm. That's why it's called as Ekapada Vibhuti and Tripada Vibhuti. It's all the Vibhutis of the Lord, but then it's categorized into one. There's one Ekapada Vibhuti, the material realm, and Tripada Vibhuti, the spiritual realm, like this. But it's all the Vibhuti of the Lord. And because Lord's Vibhuti, Lord's potency is not different from him, therefore there's nothing else but him. So we have to understand it that way, not from an impersonalistic point of view. Okay, so there is, as Prabhupada says, there is both impersonal understanding as well as there is personal understanding. There is both, the Lord is equal. We are equal to the Lord in quality, but we are different in quantity. So all these are explanations of how we should understand this one whole unit called as the absolute truth or the supreme Brahman. So the personal expansion are called the Vishnu Tattvas, and the differential expansions are called Jiva Tattvas. This we also saw in the first canto at multiple places. There is Vibhinna Amsha and there is Swa Amsha. Right? So these two. So Srila Prabhupada speaks about the personality of Krishna, and he says that the Lord is called Anupalaksha Margaha, or in still more technical Vedic terms, Avan Manasa Gocharaha, one who is never to be seen or realized by the limited sense perception of the people in general. Naham Prakasha Sarvasya Yogamaya Samavrtaha. So the Lord could not be understood by the limited sense perception, even though there is nothing else but Krishna. So the Lord, he covers himself. Okay. So by Yogamaya, by the cover of Yogamaya, he hides himself. And the Lord is Shita Krishna Keshaha, or one who is observed always with the beautiful black hair. Both Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram have such hair on their heads, and thus even in advanced age, they appeared like young boys, 16 years old. Although he is the oldest personality among all living entities, he always looks like a new, youthful boy. So, the spiritual body does not have birth, death, old age and disease. So, it does not matter how. So, this is a proof that the Lord comes in his spiritual body. Okay. In the material world, anyone who has got material body, or everyone has got material body, so there is this phases of aging, there is a phase of old age. These 6 vikaras, these 6 changes are there, transformations of the body. But the Lord did not undergo these 6 transformations. Okay, and apparently it looks like he attained from a baby's form to a youthful form. So that can be called as a vikara, a transformation, but it's not a transformation. Each one of these forms is a transcendental form of the Lord, spiritual form of the Lord. And that is proved when, although he was 125 years old, by the time he left this world, still he looked just like a youthful person of 16 years old. So the spiritual body is conspicuous by the absence of those symptoms of birth, death, old age and disease. So when the Lord descends from that world to this world, he descends in a spiritual body of Atma Maya or internal potency, without any touch of Bahiranga Maya or external material energy. So although the Lord comes inside the material realm, physically, people who saw him 5,000 years back, they could see the Lord in front of them, face to face. So physically, it looked like the Lord has entered into the material world. But his influence is such that wherever he goes, everything becomes spiritual. Okay, so the Lord is never affected or is never in touch with the external potency, his material energy. So the allegation that the impersonal Brahman appears in this material world by accepting a material body is quite absurd. Therefore, the Lord, when he comes here, has not a material body but a spiritual body. The impersonal Brahmajyoti is only a glaring effulgence of the Lord. And there is no difference in quality between the body of the Lord and the impersonal ray of the Lord, called Brahmajyoti. So all are spiritual. Brahmajyoti is spiritual. So now this text says that when the world is overburdened by the fighting strength of the kings who have no faith in God, the Lord, just to diminish the distress of the world, descends with his plenary portion. So it suggests that the Lord comes to vanquish the demons or to diminish the distress of the world. So Srila Prabhupada addresses that point and he says, now the question is why the Lord, who is omnipotent means who can achieve anything that he desires, has to come to this world to diminish the distress of this material. Why does he have to do that? So certainly the Lord need not come here for such purpose, but he actually descends to exhibit his transcendental activities in order to encourage his pure devotees who want to enjoy life by chanting the glories of the Lord. So the answer is that just to expand his transcendental glories, which can then be chanted or recited by his pure devotees, he comes here. Okay. There is no doubt about Lord Krishna's being the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, how was it possible for him to kill a giant demon like Putna when he was just on the lap of his mother, to overturn a cart with his leg when he was only 3 months old, to uproot a pair of Arjuna trees so high that they touched the sky when he was only crawling? All these activities are impossible for anyone other than the Lord himself. So this is in support to if you remember, in the 3rd chapter of 1st Canto, there is a list of incarnations which is given. And finally in the 28th verse, then it's mentioned, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam is the Supreme Lord himself. So in the same manner, here we see that all the incarnations of the Lord have been mentioned. And specifically Lord Brahma, he spends 10 verses, or he speaks 10 verses, talking about the glories of Krishna, which is a support to that verse, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Okay, Ete Cham Shakala Pumsha Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. So this is an expansion, you can say. So these 2 chapters are kind of related. Okay. So here he says the Lord Krishna is the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, he recounts these pastimes. How is it possible for him to kill Putna when he was only on the lap of his mother? How he can kill Shakatasura when he's only 3 months old? And how he can uproot a pair of Arjuna trees which are so high that it touched the sky when he was only crawling? So these activities are impossible for anyone other than the Lord himself. Srila Prabhupada, it's a classic purport because he has spoken about this several times in his lectures, that God is God eternally. He is not created by the process of meditation or any kind of process and becoming Brahman. So that is not the way the Lord is created. Krishna is not created like that. And then he recounts the pastimes of Putna. And he says, Lord Krishna did not need to expand himself to the length of the she-demon Putana. So Putana was almost 6 miles long. Right? Or when she entered the house, she was just like a normal person. But when the Lord sucked the life air along with that poison, then she was writhing in pain. And then she expanded her body, came to her natural form. And her body was so huge, she was almost 6 miles long. Okay, it was almost some 10, 12, 11 kilometers long. Okay, so here Prabhupada says the Lord did not have to expand that big to prove or to fight with that demon or fight with this Putna. He did not have to expand himself so much. Just in his smallest of forms, when he was only 7 days old, correct? He was only 7 days old when he killed Putna. It was just a baby, 7 days old baby, still he was able to kill Putna. So that proves the potency of the Lord. But it does not mean that the Lord cannot expand himself also. So when he has to expand, in case of Bali Maharaj, where he has to take away the land, he expanded himself beyond this whole universe. Okay, not only the 6 miles of Putna, but he expanded him throughout the whole universe. Okay, so the Lord can expand and he can achieve whatever he wants to achieve, or he can be the smallest of forms, just like a baby of 7 days old, and then he can achieve whatever he wants to achieve. And in this particular case, he did not expand himself because of his love for Mother Yashoda. So Prabhupada writes, it was not very difficult for Krishna to perform a miracle by extending his bodily feature, but he had no desire to do it because of his deep filial love for his mother Yashoda. If Yashoda had seen Krishna in her lap extending 6 miles to cope with the she-demon Putna, then the natural filial love of Yashoda would have been hurt, because in that way Yashoda would have come to know that her so-called son Krishna was God himself. Okay, so he achieved all the purposes, but he made sure that his rasa, his relationship with his mother, is not hampered. So Krishna did not have to undergo or become God by undergoing severe penances. Although some men think of becoming God in that way. By undergoing severe austerities and penances, one cannot become one or equal with God, but one can attain most of the godly qualities. He can become godly, but he cannot become God. So then the glories of Lord's pastimes, it fulfills everyone's desires. So he killed the Shakatasura, and he also was responsible for falling these 2 high Arjuna trees. And Yashoda, when she came and saw, she thought that her child had been saved from the falling trees by the mercy of the Lord, without knowing that the Lord himself has wreaked the havoc. So he played the part of the Almighty Lord whenever it was required, and he also fulfilled Mother Yashoda's desire, her anxiety. Yashoda's anxiety itself is relishing. Okay, so that also he fulfilled. And it's a very nice comment which Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives here. He says he killed Putna when he was a small baby, not when he was bigger in body, but when he was very small and could be killed easily. Okay. He did not show a form like Vamana, who had great power and was very strong and large, extending over the universe, and therefore a more suitable target for being killed. By his foot, which was very tender at 3 months, he overturned this cart. He was not like Narsimha, who showed huge, tough feet for killing Hiranyakashipu. He uprooted the Arjuna trees by crawling between them while being tied to a mortar, unlike Varaha, who took great care to lift up the earth. These examples of his activities are given to illustrate how Krishna's activities cover his powers with their sweetness. These activities are not possible for the other avatars. So when the other avatars came, like Nrsimhadev came or Vamana came, in fact, not even for Vamana, Varahadev came, the tasks or the pastimes which they performed, the tasks which they accomplished, they did in a suitable form. Okay, Varahadev, he lifted the earth in a suitable form, not in a very small form. Nrsimhadev came in a very ferocious form. Vamana, although he came as a very small child, but then he expanded himself. He also showed his prowess. But Krishna, when he comes, he does not change or he does not assume a form of his body. In his own self-same body, he accomplishes everything that the other avatars accomplish. So therefore, his power, Krishna's activities, cover his powers with their sweetness. So that's why Krishna's pastimes are sweet, because they do not assume the form that is normally thought of to be assumed for performing those superhuman tasks. Even in the same form, He could kill. Just a baby, no? We haven't heard of baby killing a demon who's 6 miles long. Nrsimhadev, yes, we can understand. Okay, and Varahadev lifting the earth, yes, it is possible. But Krishna, by his sweetness, it becomes more prominent. Sweetness is more prominent, so his activities take a backstage. So that's why the pastimes are more relishing. Krishna's pastimes are more relishing in that way. And similarly, that's why Lord Ramchandra's pastimes are also very relishing. Because what he did or what he accomplished in a human form. Okay, so these two pastimes, that's why Krishna's pastimes and Rama's pastimes are relished a lot more by devotees than other pastimes. Anyway, we should not speak like this. Other pastimes are also sweet. But the point is that this is the point. Krishna's activities cover his powers with their sweetness. The sweetness is more, comparatively speaking. Okay, that way we should understand. Then also, when the cowherd boys and their animals drank the poisoned water of the river Yamuna, and after the Lord in his childhood revived them by his merciful glance just to purify the water of the river Yamuna, he jumped into it as if playing and chastised the venomous Kalia snake, which was lurking there, its tongue emitting waves of poison. Who can perform such Herculean tasks but the Supreme Lord? So you see, right, by recounting these pastimes, Lord Brahma is saying that all these activities are impossible for anyone other than the Lord himself. Who can perform such activities apart from the Supreme Lord? So he's recounting that, okay, Krishna, he is the Supreme Lord. Nobody else can perform pastimes like him. On the very night of the day of the chastisement of the Kalia snake, when the inhabitants of Vrajabhumi were sleeping carefreely, there was a forest fire ablaze due to dry leaves, and it appeared that all the inhabitants were sure to meet their death. But the Lord, along with Balaram, saved them simply by closing his eyes. Such are the superhuman activities of the Lord. So it should be noted that the Lord's activities are always superhuman, and it distinguishes him from an ordinary living being. And these are certainly impossible by any kind of human endeavor. One cannot stop the blazing forest fire just by closing his eyes. Okay, but the Lord can do that. So whoever knows the superhuman activities of the Lord due to their very transcendental nature becomes eligible to enter the kingdom of Krishna, and as such, after quitting his present material body, the knower of the transcendental activities of the Lord goes back home, back to Godhead. Okay, Janma karma cha me divyam evam yoviti tatvatah tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti mameti so Arjuna. So these are the activities that he performs. When the cowherd woman, Krishna's foster mother Yashoda, was trying to tie the hands of her son with ropes, she found the rope to be always insufficient in length. And when she finally gave up, Lord Krishna by and by opened his mouth, wherein the mother found all the universes situated. Seeing this, she was doubtful in her mind, but she was convinced in a different manner of the mystic nature of her son. Okay, so this is a different pastime. This is not the Damodar Leela, because we have already discussed that before. Okay, that we already came, right, when he fell those two Arjuna trees. So this is a different pastime where, for some reason, it seems Yashoda was trying to tie the hands of her son, and she found the rope to be always insufficient in length for the second time. And she finally gave up, and Lord Krishna opened his mouth. So in 10th canto, this pastime is basically recited when Krishna, he ate dirt, and Mother Yashoda wanted to see. Okay, but here it's recounted in a different way. And that may be because this pastime would have happened differently in a different kalpa. So Prabhupada will write that when we discuss about the incarnation of Lord Buddha, then the explanation in that verse will be completely different. And Srila Prabhupada in the purport, or actually it's a commentary, it's a comment by Jiva Goswami, which says that Lord Brahma is reciting the appearance of Lord Buddha, or the situation in which Lord Buddha appeared, of a different kalpa or different Kali Yuga, and not this Kali Yuga like this. So similarly we can understand it in this way. So because of her deep affection for Krishna, she could never think that her very son was Narayana, the personality of Godhead himself. That is the action of Yogamaya, the internal potency of the Supreme Lord, which acts to perfect all the pastimes of the Lord with his different types of devotees. Who would play such wonders without being God? Okay, so again, in this text, Lord Brahma did not ask, but Prabhupada asks the same question. Who could play such wonders without being God? Okay, so therefore Krishna is the Supreme Lord. Lord Krishna saved his foster father, Nanda Maharaj, from the fear of the demigod Varuna and released the cowherd boys from the case of the mountain. For they were placed there by the son of Maya, who is Vyomasura. This is the pastime of Vyomasura, Also, to the inhabitants of Vrindavan who were busy working during the daytime and sleeping soundly at night because of their hard labor in the day, Lord Krishna awarded promotion to the highest planet in the spiritual sky. All these acts are transcendental and certainly prove without any doubt is his godhood. Okay, so again, so the last 4 verses they are telling the same thing again. So Srila Prabhupada writes that those who have taken shelter of the Lord, they did not have to fear of the miseries of material existence. In relation to Nanda Maharaj, that Nanda Maharaj was actually not arrested by Varuna. Apparently, it seems that Nanda Maharaj entered the rivers at a wrong time, and because of that, he was arrested by the demigod Varuna. But it's not like that. Varuna wanted to see Krishna. And anyway, devotees are not fearful of any situation in the material existence because they have been sheltered by the Lord. Okay, and one point is practically the Vrindavan Vasis, the inhabitants of Vrindavana, had very little time to devote to meditation or to other paraphernalia of spiritual activities. But factually, they were engaged in the highest spiritual activities only. Everything done by them was spiritualized because everything was dovetailed in their relationship with Lord Krishna. The central point of their activities was Krishna, and as such, their so-called activities in the material world were saturated with spiritual potency. That is the advantage of the way of Bhakti Yoga. One should discharge one's duty on Lord Krishna's behalf, he says. And then, this is the highest pattern of trance and spiritual realization. So, discharging one's duty on Lord Krishna's behalf. So, basically, if you do something on someone's behalf, you do it for that person as their representative. Okay, so we understand what Krishna's desire is, and then we act, we dovetail our activities according to that. That is doing activities on Krishna's behalf. Okay, so it's not that Krishna wants us to do something, or Krishna cannot accomplish something, or rather, definitely wants us to do something. It's not that Krishna cannot accomplish something, and therefore he wants us to do something. But it is for our own benefit that if we do it on Krishna's behalf, then our activities are saturated with spiritual potency and we gain spiritual realization as his representative. So this is in every field of activities, whether it's Varna or Ashrama Dharma, or when as devotees we preach to people. So preaching, that is also Krishna desires that his message is spread all over the world for the benefit of people. So when one engages in preaching activities, then he's doing it on behalf of Krishna. He's just repeating what Krishna is repeating. Correct? So Krishna has already spoken Bhagavad Gita, and now the devotee repeats that as his representative. So that way, because it's the same message, then it acts, it works. So preaching goes on like this. When the cowherd men of Vrindavan, under the instruction of Krishna, stopped offering sacrifice to the heavenly king Indra, the whole tract of land known as Braja was threatened with being washed away by constant heavy rains for 7 days. Lord Krishna, out of his causeless mercy upon the inhabitants of Braja, held up the hill known as Govardhan with one hand only, although he was only 7 years old. He did this to protect the animals from the onslaught of water. Simple purport, and it proved definitely that anyone directly engaged as devotee of the Supreme Lord need not satisfy any other demigod. Yeah. When the Lord was engaged in his pastimes of the Rasa dance in the forest of Vrindavana, enlivening the sexual desires of the wives of the inhabitants of Vrindavan by sweet and melodious songs, a demon of the name Shankachuda, a rich follower of the treasurer of heaven, Kubera, kidnapped the damsels, and the Lord severed his head from his trunk. We should carefully note that the statements described herein are the statements of Brahmaji to Narada, and he was speaking to Narada of the events that would happen in the future during the advent of Lord Krishna. So this conversation between Brahma and Narada, it's happening somewhere in the middle, okay, between this list of incarnations. Some pastimes will happen in the future, and some pastimes have already happened in the past. Okay, so the conversation is happening kind of in between, in the day of Brahma. The demon Shankachuda was killed by the Lord during his pastime on Holika Purnima in the month of Phalguna, and the same incident is still commemorated in India by the burning of an effigy of Shankachuda one day prior to Holika Purnima, the day on which the festival, generally known as Holi, is celebrated. So this is done in the northern part of India. I don't know whether you know or not. Okay, when we were in Delhi, at that time before the day of Holi, they'll make this huge stack of wood and they'll burn it and they'll put clothes also. There's a tradition of putting old clothes into the fire with the idea that if we do that, then new clothes will automatically come. So this is basically the reason the demon Shankachuda was killed by the Lord during that day. So that is why it is celebrated like this. All the demonic personalities like Pralamba, Dhenuka, Baka, Keshi, Arishta, Chanura, Mushtika, Kuvalayapida, elephant, Kamsa, Kalyavana, Narakasura, Poundraka, great marshals like Shalva, Vivida monkey and Balvala, Dantavakra, the seven bulls, Shambara, Viduratha and Rukmi, as also great warriors like Kamboja, Matsya, Kuru, Srinja and Kekaya would all fight vigorously either with the Lord Hari directly or with him under his names of Baladeva, Arjuna, Bhima, etc. And the demons thus being killed would attain either the impersonal Brahmajyoti or his personal abode in the Vaikuntha planets. Okay, so it's interesting that Srila Prabhupada will speak about the destination of these personalities. So we'll read some portions from the purport. The personality of God Baladev is his immediate personal expansion, and Bhima and Arjuna are his personal associates. The Lord would appear with all his associates and potencies. Therefore, the rebellious souls, like the demons and demoniac men mentioned by names like Pralamba, would be killed either by the Lord himself or by his associates. And all these are explained in 10th canto. But we should know well that all the above mentioned living entities killed would attain salvation either by being merged in the Brahmajyoti of the Lord or being allowed to enter into the abodes of the Lord called Vaikuntha. And this has been explained by Bhishmadev. Those who died in the battlefield, then they attained the spiritual realm. So this is what is interesting to note here is even those demons or those personalities who were killed by Arjuna and Bhima, they also attained the same destination because the Lord accomplished his activities, his purposes through them. Okay, so when they killed anybody, then they also, the ones who were killed, they also reached impersonal Brahmajyoti or the abode of the Lord. All persons who participate in the battlefield of Kurukshetra or otherwise with the Lord or with Baladeva etc. would benefit by attaining spiritual existence according to the situation of their minds at the time of death. Those who recognize the Lord would enter Vaikuntha, and those who estimated the Lord as only a powerful being would attain salvation by merging into the spiritual existence of the impersonal Brahmajyoti of the Lord. But every one of them would get released from material existence. Okay, so Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he explains that these Pralamba, Dhenuka, Dvivida, Balvala and Rukmi were killed by Balaram. Bhima and Arjuna killed the Kambojas and others. Pradyumna killed Shambara. Muchkunda killed Yavana. The Lord did not kill them. Thus their names are also mentioned in the phrase Balapartha Bhima Vyajahvayena. They will attain liberation by the Lord, who is also called Balaram, Arjuna and Bhima, which basically means that those who were killed by Arjuna and Bhima, they will also attain liberation. Among the demons, Pralamba, Dhenuka and others will get Sayujya, and Paundraka, Dantavakra and others will get Vaikuntha. This will be understood from later statements. Okay. What is that?
They'll get Sayujya and other Salokya.
Yes. They'll go to Vaikuntha. Salokya and Sarupya. I think Paundraka is Sarupya, I think.
Salokya.
Salokya.
No, get Vaikuntha.
They'll get Vaikuntha, but in Vaikuntha we have 4 types of liberation, right? Sayujya is one outside of Vaikuntha, but inside Vaikuntha we have 4 different types of liberation. So it can be any one of them. Okay. They'll get Vaikuntha. Yes. According to this verse, we are talking only about 2 types of liberation. One is the broad category of going to Vaikuntha, and the Sayujya Mukti, merging into this impersonal Brahman. Okay. Yeah. Anyways, we'll see that later. See. So the main point is here, what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes here, that they will attain liberation by the Lord, who is also called Balaram, Arjuna and Bhima. So Balapartha Bhima Vyajahvayena. Right? So it says that, okay, where is it? See, Baladeva, the elder brother of Krishna, Partha, Arjuna, Bhima. Vyaja ahvayena, by the false names. So the Lord assumes these different names and accomplishes his task. That's what it means. So Baladev, now he is the Supreme Lord himself, but by taking the form of Arjuna and Bhima, he is basically accomplishing his task. So in Mahabharata also, rather, not Mahabharata also, but in Mahabharata, Arjuna and Bhima are the prime or the most important warriors, we can say, who killed maximum number of enemies from the opposite side. So the Lord accomplished his purpose in that way. The Lord himself in his incarnation as the son of Satyavati, Vyasadeva, will consider his compilation of the Vedic literature to be very difficult for the less intelligent persons with short lives, and thus he will divide the tree of Vedic knowledge into different branches according to the circumstances of the particular age. Srila Prabhupada speaks about Kali Yuga and how it robs people of all good sense. People in Kali Yuga, they identify with their temporary material body, and Prabhupada, they live only, nowadays they don't even live for 100 years, they live only for 40 or 60 years. And those 60 years or 40 years itself seems to be their all in all for them. So whatever endeavor they do only for this 40 or 60 years. That's it. And it's understood, no? Once a person reaches 60 years of age, and it's just a matter of time. Okay. But just for the 60 years, what he does is he struggles so much to undergo education for the first 20 years, and then the rest, he tries to do some sense gratification, but his life is led full of frustration. And somehow he thinks that he can be happy in this material world in near future. But the time goes by, okay, he becomes old, and there is no near future. The near future is only death, and he dies. And then again he has to repeat the same performance of going through the education, or if he attains a human form of life, or live like cats and dogs who are always in fear. So this is the situation in the age of Kali, or rather in all ages, and those people are described as Saeva Gokharaha, right? They are like donkeys and asses and bulls. This is the verse, Yasyasma buddhi kona pedi dhatuke sadik kalatradishu bhaume ijadihi. The Puranas and the Mahabharata are also similarly made by Vyasadeva for the different types of men in the modes of material nature. So, Vedic literatures are given by Vyasadeva, and we discussed this in the first canto, in the fourth chapter specifically, where Vyasadeva compiles, or Narad Muni comes, and Vyasadeva is dissatisfied basically. That comes in the fourth chapter, and in 5, 6 and 7, 5, 6 is where Narad Muni, he inspires Vyasadeva, tells his story, and then 7th chapter is when Vyasadeva realizes it. Okay. So Vyasadeva was dissatisfied because whatever literatures he wrote, they were still under the moods. Just like Prabhupada writes here, the Puranas and Mahabharatas are also similarly made by Vyasadeva for the different type of men in the modes of material nature. So these Puranas appeal to those people who are within the modes. Okay. But Srimad Bhagavatam appeals to those who are Paramahamsas, or who want to reach the stage of Paramahamsa. Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam is for that purpose. So Srila Vyasadeva came in that way. And Vyasadeva of this age is the Supreme Lord himself, directly, he is Vishnu Tattva. But in other ages and other yugas, or rather in other Kali yugas, he's a Shakti-Avesh avatar. Okay. He's a Jiva who is empowered by the Lord. When the atheists, after being well versed in the Vedic scientific knowledge, annihilate inhabitants of different planets, flying unseen in the sky on well-built rockets prepared by the great scientist Maya, the Lord will bewilder their minds by dressing himself attractively as Buddha and will preach on sub-religious principles. Okay, so this is completely different from our experience, and Prabhupada acknowledges that. And he says that this incarnation of Lord Buddha is not the same Buddha incarnation we have in the present history of mankind. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, the Buddha incarnation mentioned in this verse appeared in a different Kali age. In the duration of life of one Manu, there are more than 72 Kali Yugas. And Lord Buddha incarnates at a time when the people are most materialistic and preaches common sense religious principles. Okay, and then he writes about common sense religious principles, and some important points he makes here, which we'll see. That common sense religion it is a common sense religion because one is advised to do no harm to any other animal or living being. Before learning these principles of non-violence, one has to learn two other principles, namely to be humble and to be prideless. Unless one is humble and prideless, one cannot be harmless and non-violent. And after being non-violent, one has to learn tolerance and simplicity of living. One must offer respect to the great religious preachers and spiritual leaders and also train the senses for controlled action. Learning to be unattached to family and home and to render devotional service to the Lord, etc. At the ultimate stage, one has to accept the Lord and becomes devotee, otherwise there is no religion. So this is an explanation of how from the sub-religious principles, which Srila Prabhupada writes here, how one can attain to the highest religious principle. What is the stage? How does he go? So sub-religious principle is being non-violent, and the precondition to being non-violent is to become humble and prideless. Because unless one is humble and prideless, he cannot be harmless and non-violent. Okay, if one person has humility, then he will definitely not have the inclination to harm anybody. Okay, and only when one is proud, then he is proud of what? He is proud of his strength, proud of his capabilities, and then that gives an inclination to do harm to others. So therefore, humility and pridelessness is required as a precursor for being non-violent. And after one becomes non-violent, then one has to learn tolerance, and he should make his livelihood or life very simple. Then, once he refers or when he offers respect to great religious preachers and spiritual leaders, then his path towards actual religion starts. Okay, so these good qualities, once he has tolerance, humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, and simplicity, these are very conducive for accepting or for receiving the grace or mercy of a spiritual personality, of a spiritual leader or religious preacher. And once a person has these qualities, then by seeing or by serving the spiritual master or by serving the great personalities, the great devotees, his piety or his sukruti increases, and with that he makes then he could train himself for controlling the senses and become unattached and then render devotional service to the Lord. So this is how from upadharma or nearest to religious principles one can attain oneself to the higher religious principles. And this is basically the concept of morality. Okay, so only when one is non-violent or when he is not harming other living beings, then one can advance in spiritual life. Otherwise, it's difficult. So that's why Srila Prabhupada used to condemn, whenever he used to speak to Christians, the first thing he will question is, okay, Christianity is not on the same level as Krishna consciousness in terms of understanding of philosophy, in terms of his sophisticated and sublime nature. Okay, it's a sub-religious principle, we can say, Christianity. Okay, there's one of these commandments, thou shalt not kill, and Prabhupada always used to attack this point, that even your sub-religious, he will not say your religious principles are sub-religious or upadharma, but he will say, no, even in your religion, this you should not kill or you should be non-violent is there, thou shalt not kill. But still, you are engaged in killing, you are opening thousands of slaughterhouses. So how can you claim yourself as a Christian? Correct? Okay, you came as a Christian, and then from then on we can take you on the path of Krishna consciousness to a more sublime religious principle or sublime spiritual path. But then if you are not even ready to follow the most basic tenets of your own religion, which itself is sub-religious principle, then how can you go? How can you learn about the higher stages of love of Godhead? Therefore, Srila Prabhupada used to attack this point. Thereafter, at the end of Kali Yuga, when there exist no topics on the subject of God, even at the residences of so-called saints and respectable gentlemen of the three higher castes, and when the power of government is transferred to the hands of ministers elected from the low-born Shudra class, or those less than them, and when nothing is known of the techniques of sacrifice, even by word, at that time the Lord will appear as the supreme chastiser. So this is Kalki's incarnation. So the first few sections of this translation, we already see that manifest. Okay, there exist no topics on the subject of God. Okay, somewhere it's going on, so we can give that. And the power of government is transferred to the hands of ministers elected from the low-born Shudra class. That's already happened. Okay, there's nothing to speak about that. and nothing is known of the techniques of sacrifice, even by the word. At that time, the Lord will appear. So because some things is going on, devotees are still there, so therefore the Kali Yuga is still sustaining. The progress or the apparent progress that people think is being made, or the amount of satisfaction, or even the proper rotation of the seasons, that also happens only because of presence of devotees within this material world, within this earth planet. Because people are so sinful, if there are no devotees present, then the seasons will not work properly. Right now it's rainy season, okay, and we see at least some rain is coming. But when people are so sinful, there is no rain. Right? Prabhupada said that in deserts or in regions where it's no rain, it basically means that people are most sinful in that place. So here also sinful people are there, but rains still come because devotees are there. Devotees are glorifying the Lord, and that's the only reason the sacrifice is still going, or that is the sacrifice which is going. And for that reason, seasons also come, and the necessities of everybody, not only the devotees, but even the non-devotees' necessities are also fulfilled because of the presence of devotees. Okay, that's the reason. Okay, we should not understand, or we should not think that the devotees are only part, or they are only separate from the society, and the whole society is run only by the materialistic people. Materialistic people do not run anything actually. Okay, they only consume. They only consume what is given to them, and whatever is given to them is given by the Lord in terms of earth, water, fire, air, ether, water, rain that comes, vegetation that comes, crops that comes, everything comes because of sacrifices. And who is the only one who is doing sacrifice? Only devotees are doing sacrifice. Nobody else is doing the sacrifice. So all the prosperity that we see around in this world, it's all because of the devotees. So because the devotees are doing sacrifice, the materialistic people are also enjoying their life. Okay, that is how it should be understood. Okay, because they are the consumers, but the provision is given because sacrifice is going on. And who is doing the sacrifice? The devotees are doing the sacrifice. So Sankirtan, when there was drought in Hyderabad, Prabhupada writes specifically in his conversation, I think his lecture, he said, there was a drought in Hyderabad during that time, and then they did Sankirtan for 3 days, and then there were rains. Okay, so with that rain, were only the devotees benefited? No, the whole city was benefited. Okay, the drought was removed by that rain. So when devotees do Sankirtan, it is for the welfare of the whole world. That is why this is the highest welfare activity. Okay, but when devotees get diverted into this bodily, individual welfare activities or bodily welfare activities, opening of hospitals, this thing and that, it is just like watering the leaves of a tree. Okay, because Sankirtan itself will accomplish everything for non-devotees as well as devotees. Okay, so devotees actually don't have to get into any of these material welfare activities at all. But because of lack of faith, we can say, ultimately it comes down to that. Because of lack of faith in the Sankirtan process, we think that we can accomplish something else by not engaging Sankirtan, but by doing welfare activities. It's a wrong understanding of the whole process of sacrifice, or of the whole Krishna conscious process. Because it's evident, Srila Prabhupada, even this thing, whenever there's a drought or there is a flood, and people used to come and ask Srila Prabhupada for help, that with your manpower and resources, you can help so much. And this famous letter, Andhra Pradesh Relief Fund, you know that, right? It's there in the Science of Self-Realization. Very clearly Srila Prabhupada writes, you do Sankirtan, you do devotional service to the Lord, everything will be taken care of. So it is not some utopian idea. It's not that Prabhupada is being very unreasonable. Okay, because whatever is being provided is provided by the Supreme Lord, and if he is pleased, it is his system that he will provide. But because people are not devotees of the Lord, they are not recognizing the supremacy of the Lord and that he is the provider, he is the proprietor of everything. What they do is they try to make the stopgap arrangements, okay, these temporary arrangements, and by that they become bewildered, and they think that we are all impractical, and whatever they are doing is practical because it's actually helping others. But no, it's not the fact. Whatever we are doing or whatever the devotees do, okay, that is the actual help for everybody, devotees, non-devotees, every living being. And whatever they are doing, it's just an eyewash, you can say. It will help them for some moment of time. After that, it is gone. So the only way to attain permanent happiness is by rendering devotional service, by performing the sacrifice. But so social Prabhupada writes here, the symptoms of the worst condition of the material world at the last stage of this age, called Kali Yuga, are stated herein. The sum and substance of such conditions is godlessness. Even the so-called saints and higher castes of the social orders, generally known as the Dvijajanas or the twice born, will become atheists. And they forget the holy name of the Lord. Okay, so what to speak of his activities? The higher caste of the society is supposed to lead the society properly, but they themselves don't have any knowledge, so how will they lead? They should be well versed in the knowledge of Supreme Lord, but then they are not in the age of Kali. And because the Shudras, low-born Shudras, have taken hold of the governments, of the leadership, the power of government, they do not listen. They do not listen to the Brahmanas. Okay, Shudras don't have the tendency to listen to the Brahmanas. Kshatriyas, because they're cultured, they're educated, they have the tendency to listen to the Brahmanas. Shudras, when they get power, then they do not want to listen to anybody. That's why Shudras are always kept at the lower stratum of the society. Okay, they should not be paid salaries also, it is said. We discussed, I think it was there in first Canto. The Shudras are not given salary because they do not know what to do with that money. They do not know what to do with that money, and if they get lots and lots of money, they will create only havoc because they do not have the inclination to hear from higher personalities, from spiritual personalities, from the Brahmanas. So Shudras should not be there at the top, but right now Shudras are there in the top. That's the situation. Okay. The saints and the higher castes or orders of the society are judged by their proportion of knowledge in the science of God or Tattva Jnana, and not by any kind of birthright or bodily designation. So the Brahmanas are namesake Brahmanas in the sense that they are born in a Brahmana family. So therefore they claim themselves to be Brahmanas. The whole caste system has become like this. So the Varna and Ashrama system became the caste system by being godless. So when Krishna was removed from the Varna and Ashrama system, then it automatically degraded into this caste system where everything becomes by birthright. When Krishna is there, then it's according to qualification. And as Krishna is removed more and more from this Varna and Ashrama system, then it becomes just based on the birth. Okay. So from the spiritual understanding of Varna and Ashrama, it comes to the material understanding, which is birth. Okay, the birth of this material body. So Srimad Bhagavatam is meant to bring about revolution of consciousness in human society. But so Srila Prabhupada writes here that those who are concerned of or those who think that they are twice born only because they are born to a father who is a Brahmana, this is like a life of an animal. Okay, if it's a cat and then a kitten is born, the kitten automatically is considered a cat. Okay, so similarly dog, then it has its puppies, then they are automatically considered dogs. But in human form of life, there is different specific divisions of varnas. It's Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. As a category, they are all human beings. But their activities are completely different. Brahmana's activities are different. Kshatriya's different. Vaishya's different. Shudra's different. But a cat and a kitten's activity are same. There is no difference, there is no distinction between their activities. Similarly, in any other species of animal life or insect life or plant life also, whatever their progeny is, they act in the same way as their, as from the source from which they came or from their parents. Okay, so there is only one category, animal life, that's it. But in human form of life, the activities are different based on the different varnas. But if we stick or if we stamp the activities only based on the birth, then it is on the animal platform. So progress of life on the animal principles of eating, sleeping, faring and mating without any scientific culture of sacrificial spiritual life is called the Shudra life or the uncultured life of lower class of men. So therefore, because the Shudras have taken up the government, no one can expect any peace and prosperity. So the duty of the leaders of men is to take note of it and try to reform the social order by introducing the principles of twice born men trained in the science of God consciousness. This can be done by expanding the culture of Srimad Bhagavatam all over the world. So this is preaching. By preaching, we are expanding the culture of Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay. So as Srimad Bhagavatam is spread more and more, then automatically everything comes into picture. The social order the chaos in the social order is removed. Okay, that comes into its proper perspective, into the way Krishna designed it, and then people also advance spiritually. So this is the reason why Srila Prabhupada stressed on the Varna and Ashrama institution, that Varna Ashrama must be established, because that gives a culture, okay, that brings back the culture where the Brahmanas are respected, the Kshatriyas are the leaders, the Vaishyas are the providers, and Shudras are the worker. Then everything is taken care of very nicely, and all based on the principles of Srimad Bhagavatam. So everything becomes conducive for spiritual advancement. Okay, so one detail that Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes here is that avatara should be seen in proper perspective. In the conversation between Brahma and Narada, Varaha and others had already appeared in the past. Some of the Manvantara avatars had appeared in the past, and some will appear in the future. Dhanvantari and Parshuram existed then, so they were there at that time. Rama and others are in the future. In the verses, sometimes the tenses do not reflect this because of necessities of meter. Okay, because of Sanskrit stuff. But this is the list. Some incarnations appeared before and some after. And when they were speaking, then Parshuram and Dhanvantari were there. They were existing. Okay, so this is the last verse, I think, of the incarnations of the Lord. This is a kind of conclusion. At the beginning of creation, there are penance. Myself, Brahma, and the 9 Prajapatis, the great sages who generate. Then, during the maintenance of the creation, there are Lord Vishnu, the demigods with controlling powers, and the kings of different planets. But at the end, there is irreligion, and then Lord Shiva and the atheists full of anger, etc. All of them are different representative manifestations of the energy of the supreme power, the Lord. Okay, so this is the conclusion, that all of them, we have seen the Leela Avataras, and even if you consider the Guna Avataras, they also come from the Lord, or they are also representations of the energy of the Supreme Person. Okay, creation is maintained. In the stage when the creation is maintained, there are devotional service to Lord Vishnu or factual religion, the different demigods and the kings of different planets who maintain the world. So this is during maintenance. And Lord Shiva destroys. Ultimately, the material creation is but a temporary manifestation meant to give the chance of liberation to the conditioned souls. So this is the purpose. So this was described as the vibhutis of the Gunavataras within the material world according to divisions. So the 9 principal rishis are Marichi, Atri, Angira, Pulastya, Pulaha, Kratu, Bhrigu, Vasishtha and Atharva. This is given in the purport of 3rd Canto, 24th chapter, 15th verse. Okay, these are the 9 Prajapatis. Fine. So, going back to our breakup from 40 to 41, now Lord Brahma will speak that no one can completely describe and understand the glories of the Lord. So he will say, or he says, who can describe completely the prowess of Vishnu? Even the scientist who might have counted the particles of the atoms of the universe cannot do so, because it is Vishnu only who in his form of Trivikrama moved his leg effortlessly beyond the topmost planet Satyaloka up to the neutral state of the 3 modes of material nature, and all planets were moved. So who can describe the complete prowess of Lord Vishnu? Whatever I have spoken till now, Lord Brahma is saying, this is just a small portion of it. Completely cannot be described, because those scientists who can count the atoms of the universe, even they cannot do so. Okay, so this neutral state which is mentioned here, it's covering of the universe. Okay, it's a neutral state of the modes of nature called the covering of the material world. So there are 7 layers, and these 7 layers are neutral. Okay, so the modes are active but are balanced. So Trisamya, this is the word which is being used here. So Trisamya means the neutral states of the 3 modes. So although the modes are active, but they are in balance. Okay. How is it different from Mahatattva is in Pradhana is the modes are not active at all. Okay, it's unmanifest stage. It's Avyakta stage. Avyakta, right? Avyakta and Vyakta. Avyakta. It's Avyakta stage where it's not manifest. So the modes are not even manifest. So that way we can say the modes are not agitated. In Mahatattva, the modes are agitated and they are not in balance. Okay, but in the neutral state, after the elements are created, in this neutral state where the elements are covering the globe of this universe, they are in the neutral state. They are balanced. All the 3 modes are balanced. So no activity happens there. So that's why we will see that devotees worship the Lord in all 7 coverings of this universe. There are different forms of the Lord in the different 7 coverings of this universe, and devotees worship them there. Okay. Neither I nor all the sages born before you fully know fully the omnipotent personality of Godhead. So what can others who are born after us know about him? So neither Lord Brahma, nor all the sages born before you, before Narada, know the Lord fully. Even the first incarnation of the Lord, namely Shesha, has not been able to reach the limit of such knowledge, although he is describing the qualities of the Lord with 1,000 mouths. Right? So Lord Brahma is saying, I do not know the end of the strength of his Maya Shakti, what to speak of his spiritual energy. And we discussed this point before, that we cannot understand this manifested creation. Even the Lord Brahma cannot understand how the material nature is working, how Maya Shakti of the Lord works. So what to speak of us? But anyone who is specifically favored by the Lord, by the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, due to unalloyed surrender onto the service of the Lord, can overcome the insurmountable ocean of illusion and can understand the Lord. But those who are attached to this body, which is meant to be eaten at the end by dogs and jackals, cannot do so. So now 42 to 46, the next 3 texts will speak of how one can understand the Lord to some extent. And that is possible through unalloyed surrender. So Srila Prabhupada specifically concentrates on this point as to those who are attached to this body, which is meant to be eaten at the end by dogs and jackals, cannot do so. So those who are attached to this body, they cannot make spiritual advancement. They cannot surrender to the Lord in an unalloyed manner. So unalloyed surrender is possible only for those who are disassociated or who are detached from their body. So attachment to perishable body is the failure of civilization. The unalloyed devotees know the glories of the Lord in the sense that they can understand how great the Lord is and how great is his expansion of diverse energy. And those who are attached to perishable body can hardly enter into the realm of signs of Godhead. The materialist is always busy working for the welfare of the material body, not only his own, but also those of his children, kinsmen, communitymen, countrymen, etc. They engage in philanthropic, altruistic activities from a political, national and international angle of vision. But none of the field work can go beyond the jurisdiction of the misconception of identifying the material body with the spirit soul. So this is what we discussed, that mundane welfare activities, it does not take one to the spiritual platform. Okay, mundane welfare activities, does not matter whether devotees perform it or whether normal materialists perform it. It does not take one beyond matter. Okay, so this is one thing which is very important to understand. Unless therefore one is saved from the wrong conception of the body and soul, there is no knowledge of Godhead. And unless there is no knowledge, all advancement of material civilization, however dazzling, should be considered a failure. So this is the sequence. Wrong conception of body and soul, no knowledge of Godhead, failure of advanced modern civilization. So now Lord Brahma will list of all those great personalities who are able to know the Lord to some extent because they are surrendered souls. So he says, O Narada, although the potencies of the Lord are unknowable and immeasurable, I still know how he acts through his Yogamaya potencies. So although the potencies of the Lord are unknowable and immeasurable, I still know how he acts through his Yogamaya potencies. Although it's unknowable, Lord Brahma still knows. And similarly, the potencies of the Lord are also known to you, to the all-powerful Shiva, to the great king of the atheist family, namely Prahlad Maharaj, to Swayambhuva Manu, his wife Shatarupa, and his sons and daughters, namely Priyavrata, Uttanapad, Akuti, Devahuti, and Prasuti, to Prachina Barhi, Ribhu, Anga, the father of Vena, and to Maharaj Dhruva, Ikshvaku, Aila, Muchkunda, Maharaj Janak, Gadhi, Raghu, Ambarish, Sagar, Gaya, Nahusha, Mandhata, Alarka, Shatadhanu, Anu, Rantidev, Bhishma, Bali, Amuttaraya, Dilipa, Shobhari, Utanka, Shibi, Devala, Pipalada, Saraswata, Uddhava, Parashara, Bhurishena, Vibhishan, Hanuman, Shukdev Goswami, Arjuna, Arstishena, Vidura, Shrutadeva, etc. Because we are all surrendered souls, we know how the Lord acts through his potencies. Okay, so these are the personalities who know about the Lord. Speculative attempts to know the Lord's material potencies is a failure. What to speak of his spiritual potencies. So the potencies of the Lord are unknowable, means even the material potencies are also unknowable. And speculative attempts are not possible because speculation arises from one's own mind and intelligence, which is already conditioned. Okay, it's already covered. So that which is already covered cannot cultivate or cannot create something which can go beyond that covering. Okay, that's common sense. So speculation, when it starts about the Lord's material potencies, it cannot lead to proper knowledge. Proper knowledge is attained only when someone who's beyond the modes gives the knowledge, okay, and takes the living entity beyond the modes. Okay, then it's possible. By the limited instruments of knowledge, either the senses or the material instruments like microscopes and telescopes, one cannot even fully know the Lord's material potencies, which are manifested before our eyes. So this is specifically directed towards the material scientists. Okay. So this attempt of all the intelligent men from the history of this world, of all the material people, they have tried to analyze matter in different ways. Okay. The same matter has been analyzed in different ways by different people in different processes or manner. That is why we have different branches of scientific knowledge. Okay. The same matter, they have tried to analyze and tried to come up with something. But still they cannot understand completely of how the Lord manifests this material nature. Okay. Even though it's manifested in front. So great scientists of the world are trying to reach the moon. One example he gives. The nearest of the planets, but they have no ascertainable clue as to how to reach it. And there are many millions and billions of other planets far and far beyond scientists' calculation. So this Prabhupada writes because it is one of the, at least during that time, it is one of the most glorious achievements of material science. Okay, fine, whatever is there within our purview, we can go and do some analysis, do some research, do this and do that, do something. But moon has always been that which has not been reached by anybody. Okay, so when during this 1970s, during Prabhupada's time only, it was claimed that 3 people have landed on the moon. Okay, so it was achieved, it was thought of as the greatest achievement that the whole of humanity, right from the start, whenever it started, according to them, about 4 lakh years back or whenever it was, from that point to this point, when people have landed on the moon, this is the highest achievement. Okay, there is no other scientific achievement which even comes closer to going to the moon. When we speak of going to the moon, it looks very simple, but actually to come out of this Earth's atmosphere and to reach the moon somewhere which is there in the sky, which is almost lakhs of kilometers away, or thousands and thousands or tens of thousands of kilometers away, to go there and land there is a very huge achievement for the scientists. But we know they did not go. Okay, it's a fact that they did not go, but they claimed to go there, and by that they convinced many people of the authority of science. So it can be considered as one of the turning points where people who were theists, okay, they became so much convinced by science that finally they started turning away from religion and towards scientific advancement. And this continues even now. At that point only it was a race between America and USSR, Russia. It was not Russia, USSR at that time, and they wanted to see who sends the rocket first. Okay, China was also involved at that time. So US sent, and then after that the Russian people claimed that they have sent, and then after that everybody got into this so-called space race, right? The race to go to the space. So they want to go, it's a race, and now everybody is sending rockets. But after this, after the moon, after people are sent to the moon, no other person has ever gone to the moon till this point. Okay, no one has gone. or those 3 people, and that's it. They claim that they have sent some spaceships to the moon, it landed there, it took some photographs, it is transmitting some images and all kinds of things they speak. But if people can land with that technology in 1970, why can't they do now? For that, they don't have any answer, or they have lots of speculative answers for this also. But the point is that anyway, they could not reach the moon. It's a heavenly planet. And this, specifically Prabhupada is writing about this in the purport because this is considered to be the highest achievement of the material scientists. And Prabhupada grants here, okay, fine, even if they could have gone to the moon, but still there are thousands and hundreds of other planets also. So what achievement have you made by just going to one of these planets? Right? What about the other billions of planets that are there in the universe? So you cannot go there. So even if you accept that you have gone to the moon or you have gone to some other place which is not the moon, but still there are so many other things to explore. So you can never claim that your knowledge is perfect. The material scientists can never claim that their knowledge is perfect or whatever they're saying is perfect. So therefore this descending process or this avaroha pantha is perfect because the knowledge comes from that source who knows everything. It comes directly from Krishna who created this material world. And from there, through disciplic succession, perfect knowledge automatically comes. So in material world, the perfect knowledge is Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi Dukkha Doshanu Darshanam. This is perfect knowledge of this material world. Okay, every other material knowledge that the material scientists create, it is basically an illusion because they don't speak about this one thing of birth, death, old age and disease, but they speak about everything else. There are thousands, millions and trillions of books which are being published about each and every aspect of material or matter, each and every aspect of material knowledge that they have gained. But the topmost material knowledge is there within half of a verse in Bhagavad Gita itself. This they do not know. Okay, so that is the fault of this Aroha Pantha. See, this birth, death, old age and disease is experienced by everybody. It's not that only devotees are experiencing it or those who read Bhagavad Gita, they get influenced by birth, death, old age and disease. It is something which everybody undergoes. Correct? Each and every living entity goes through this cycle of birth, death, old age and disease. But still, materialists cannot understand it because their knowledge is faulty. Their way of gaining knowledge itself is faulty. So even though they see it, they cannot acknowledge it. They cannot understand it. They think it's nature. That's it. Just dismiss. Whenever this talk comes out, they say, oh, natural. Death is natural. Right? So many times we have heard this argument. Oh, death is natural. How can we stop? Anyone who is born, he has to die. So they know that death is there. But they do not know the solution for it. And does not matter how much material advancement they make, scientific advancement they make, they can never come to the solution of these 4 problems of life. But if one gains knowledge from this Avaroha Pantha, from disciplic succession, he automatically gains the knowledge right there within the first 700 verses of Bhagavad Gita. He has complete knowledge at that. Okay, so that way this Avaroha Pantha or descending knowledge is what is perfect. Even though we might not be able to understand everything that the material potency has to offer, but actually we don't have to understand that also. It's not required. If the goal itself is to get out of this, then what's the point of making so much analysis and research to understand this matter? So devotional service, that's why it encompasses everything, because it gives solution to the ultimate problems of life. Mental speculators, by adding some dozens of ifs and maybes, cannot aid the advancement of knowledge. Right? They cannot they cannot aid the advancement of knowledge. On the contrary, such mental speculators will only end in despair by dismissing the case abruptly. Right? This is what I said. Case abruptly. Oh, there is no God. Birth and disease is natural. Death is natural. Oh, dismissed. I don't know what you want to talk about it. It's dismissed. And declaring the non-existence of God. Because according to them, everything comes from the senses. Or whatever they can perceive, that's knowledge. And whatever they cannot perceive, it's not knowledge. But they do not know that even if there are things which they cannot perceive, but then it works. Okay, there are so many things that work like this. But they cannot understand it. So therefore, one should not speculate, one should just surrender. So as a matter of course, the sane person tries to learn to surrender unto the Supreme Lord, who alone can lead one to the platform of real knowledge. So this is your disciplic succession. Disciplic succession comes with surrender. Okay, disciplic succession itself means that surrender is involved. It's inherent in that process. Because if one does not surrender, pranipat is not there, okay, then there is no transfer of knowledge. Right? Tat viti pranipatena, pariprashnena, sevaya, upadekshanti te jnanam, jnanina tattvadarshinaha. So this is applicable even right from the Supreme Lord himself. Unless and until one surrenders to the Supreme Lord, it is not possible to gain transcendental knowledge. Avaruha Pantha does not work without surrender. Okay, it does not work without surrender. One might be initiated, okay, specifically coming to this disciplic succession, one might be initiated, okay, he might have taken Diksha from spiritual master also. But if he's not surrendered to the spiritual master in the disciplic succession, there is no transfer of knowledge, there is no gain of knowledge. Transcendental knowledge is not gain without surrendering to the spiritual master in that disciplic line. That's why it said, Yasya deva parabhaktir, yatha deva tatha guru, tasya katiyate prakashante mahatmana. Knowledge is revealed within the heart for those who have faith in the spiritual master as well as the Supreme Lord. Surrender must be there to the spiritual master as well as the Supreme Lord. Then knowledge is revealed. Only coming or only taking this formality of initiation does not transmit the transcendental knowledge. Okay, one has to surrender, one has to serve, do service, one has to ask proper questions, one has to inquire properly. Then transcendental knowledge is transferred. In the Upanishads, it is clearly said that the Lord can never be known simply by working very hard and taxing the good brain, nor can he be known simply by mental speculation and jugglery of words. Basically means the Lord cannot be known by fruitive activities or by speculative activities, means karma and jnana. The Lord cannot be known just by karma and jnana. The Lord is known only by one who is a surrendered soul. Here Brahmaji, the greatest of all material living beings, acknowledges truth. Therefore, the fruitless spoiling of energy by pursuing the path of experimental knowledge must be given up. Okay, it must be given up. Okay, 46th verse. Surrendered souls, even from groups leading sinful lives, such as women, the laborer class, the mountaineers, and the shabaras, or even the birds and beasts, can also know about the science of Godhead and become liberated from the clutches of illusory energy by surrendering onto the pure devotees of the Lord and by following in their footsteps in devotional service. So even for the birds and beasts, it is possible to become liberated by surrendering to the pure devotee of the Lord. How can one surrender? The personality of Godhead may not be present before one's eyes. So then how can we surrender? But if one is sincere in wanting such guidance, the Lord will send a bona fide person who can guide one properly back home, back to Godhead. There is no need of material qualification for making progress on the path of spiritual realization. Okay, there is no need for material qualification. Material qualifications are anyway useless. In sense of gaining spiritual knowledge. Okay, spiritual knowledge is not gained by material qualification. It's not that one should become a doctor or an engineer or have multiple degrees, a PhD or something to gain transcendental knowledge. Okay, even a small child can gain transcendental knowledge by the mercy of the pure devotee. What is required is surrender to the Lord. Okay, so even a small boy of 5 or 6 years old, by surrendering to the Lord completely, then it is possible for him to gain transcendental knowledge. And there are examples in Bhagavatam itself. In the devotional service of the Lord, the only qualification required is surrender. Okay, so this is surrender. This whole purport is about surrender. Surrendering oneself is in one's own hand. If one likes, he can surrender immediately. And that begins his spiritual life. In other words, the loving representative of Lord is more kind and more easy to approach. A sinful soul cannot approach the Lord directly, but such a sinful man can very easily approach a pure devotee of the Lord. So this is the process of surrender. And if one has to surrender to the Lord, it is to be done through the agency of the pure devotee. That's how the Lord accepts one's surrender. Okay, one cannot directly approach the Lord because the living entity is sinful by nature. He might not be manifesting his sinful tendencies, but right being in the material world itself is a disqualification to approach the Lord. Okay, so the only way is through the representative, the loving representative of the Lord, his spiritual master. He is more merciful than the Lord because he gives his association. Even though he is as good as God, Sakshad Haritvena Samastasha. He's as good as the Lord, but he's so merciful than the Lord that he gives his association so that a sinful man can also approach. Realization of the science of Godhead and relief from the unnecessary, useless struggle for existence are not at all difficult for the willing candidate. Okay, one thing is it's unnecessary and it is useless because it's not required to be done to struggle in the material world, and useless because even if we struggle, nothing useful comes out of it. Okay, so it's both unnecessary as well as useless struggle for existence. And one who has want to come out of it, then he should surrender to the Lord. And realization of science of Godhead relief is not difficult for the willing candidate. So this is the conclusion. So to understand the Lord, one has to surrender unto Him. And the process of surrender is surrender to His devotees. Now Lord Brahma will move to the next topic of speaking about Brahman and Paramatma. Okay, the text will speak about Brahman and Paramatma, but Srila Prabhupada will speak about the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his purport. Okay, he'll say Paramatma and all, don't bother. Brahman realization, he'll explain that how it is inferior to the personality of the Lord. And then Paramatma means the Supreme Lord Himself. No? Just go and surrender, that's it. No need to do anything else. The Supreme Lord is the Supreme Soul, he will say, and then he'll speak about that. So, what is realized as the absolute Brahman is full of unlimited bliss without grief. Actually, this purport is quite good in a way that it will very clearly say what actually is Brahman realization. Okay, we hear about Brahman realization, but then what does it mean? How is it achieved, or what does it mean? So this purport, the first paragraph explains that actually. That is certainly the ultimate phase of the Supreme Enjoyer, the personality of Godhead. He is eternally void of all disturbances and fear. He is complete consciousness as opposed to matter. Uncontaminated and without distinctions, He is the principle of the primeval cause of all causes and effects, in whom there is no sacrifice for fruitive activities and before whom the illusory energy, being ashamed, does not stand. So this verse clearly distinguishes between the Lord being completely different or completely separated from anything material. Because in matter there is grief and there is no bliss or very limited bliss. But in absolute Brahman there is unlimited bliss without any grief. Okay. And this is the ultimate phase of the Supreme Enjoyer. The Lord is expanding His energy in the material realm, but the ultimate phase of the Supreme Enjoyer, the personality of Godhead, is His absolute position of Brahman, where He is engaged in unlimited bliss and there is no grief in that. He is eternally void of all disturbances and fear. There is no disturbance or fear, just like it's found in the material realm. He is complete consciousness as opposed to matter. There is no dravya, there is no jada tattva. It's only complete consciousness. He is uncontaminated from the modes and without any distinctions. Without distinctions means there is no distinctions due to the modes of what is good and what is bad. Within the material realm, this mode of goodness is considered good. Mode of passion is for activity. Mode of ignorance is considered bad. There are distinctions within the modes. But with the Lord, there is no distinction like this. His activities are completely transcendental. There is no distinction. Just like we cannot say the Lord performs His activities in mode of goodness because they are good for everybody else. Those kind of things do not work here. The Lord is beyond the modes. So there is no distinction of the modes within the Lord. He is the principle of the primeval cause of all causes and effects, in whom there is no sacrifice for fruitive activities. So even though He is the cause of all causes, okay, it's not that He is influenced by His activities. The Lord performs activities, He is the cause. See, when we say there is an effect, and if we say there is a cause, that the cause must transform or the cause must perform something so that the effect can be achieved or effect can be attained. Correct? If something is there and from there it has to go to a certain stage, someone must do something. Then only it can reach from one stage to another stage. If you have to cook, we have to cut the vegetable, get the vegetables, cut the vegetables, do all those things properly. Then the effect is there, your prepared dish, prepared item. Before that, there's only the cause. Then there's the ingredient cause, is all the vegetables, all the masalas and whatever you put. And then there's an effective cause or one who does the activity of cooking. But the Lord is the cause of all causes. He is the cause of those ingredients also, and He is the cause of even the effective cause also. He is both. But then He is not influenced by any activity. He is not influenced by any fruitive activity. He is not performing the creation to gain something out of it. Fruitive activity means what? One person performs activity so that he can gain something from it. Correct? But the Lord does not perform any activity from which He needs something to gain. His apta kama, all His desires are automatically fulfilled. He does not have to do anything to gain something out of it. So therefore, although He is the cause of all causes, there is no sacrifice for fruitive activities. There is no fruitive activities that He has to perform. He is not performing those activities as a sacrifice to gain something. He is not doing that. And before whom the illusory energy, being ashamed, does not stand. So it does not even come in front of Him. Okay, so therefore the Lord is never influenced by the illusory energy, the material energy. So this verse, Prabhupada speaks about Brahman, and he says that the conception of impersonal Brahman realization is the first step, right? We know this. Due to his distinction from the illusory conception of material existence. In other words, impersonal Brahman is a feature of the Absolute distinct from the material variegatedness, just as light is a conception distinct from its counterpart, darkness. But the light has its variegatedness, which is seen by those who further advance in the light. And thus the ultimate realization of Brahman is the source of the Brahman light, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Samam Bonum, or the ultimate source of everything. Therefore, meeting the personality of Godhead includes the realization of the impersonal Brahman as realized at first in contrast with material inebriety. And he says, Pratibodha Matram is a conception just opposite to that of material existence. So this is your Brahman realization. In matter, there are material miseries. And thus, in the first realization of Brahman, there is the negation of such material inebrities. And there is a feeling of eternal existence distinct from the pangs of birth, death, disease and old age. This is the primary conception of the impersonal Brahman. So impersonal Brahman realization is only this much. Okay, so one who is Brahman realized, he understands that there is material problems, okay, and there is a negation of such material problems, and there is a feeling of eternal existence distinct from the pangs of birth, death, old age and disease. So you see, Prabhupada writes only about eternal existence, only Sat feature. He does not write about the Chit or the feeling of eternal transcendental or gaining transcendental knowledge or Brahmananda as it is spoken about. There is bliss, there is a feeling, okay, but that feeling is because of understanding or realizing the eternal existence of the living entity. That's it, okay. So that is it. This is the conception of impersonal Brahman. This is the Brahman realization, where one is negating the material influence and he completely realizes that he is the soul and not the body. That's it. That is Brahman realization. And okay. So this is also there in I think in the first text of Isha Upanishad. It mentions, right, the impersonal Brahman is a realization of the Sat feature of the Lord, and the Paramatma is the Chit, Sat and Chit feature, and Bhagavan realization is the Sat, Chit and Ananda feature of the Lord. It's there in Isha Upanishad. Okay. So Supreme Lord is the Supreme Soul. So Supreme Lord is the Supreme Soul of everything, and therefore in Him the supreme conception of affection is realized. This conception of affection is due to relationship of soul to soul. Father and son's affection, basically. So he is the super soul. The Lord is a super soul or Paramatma within everyone's heart. In the liberated state of affairs, the full-fledged affection for the Lord is awakened. Okay, so this verse actually has Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur tells that this verse is an explanation of the Brahman and Paramatma feature. This Brahman feature, what we discussed here, and the next verse will speak about the Paramatma feature of the Lord. So Srila Prabhupada here, he is speaking about the Paramatma feature also, as he does in other purports, where he gives an introduction to the next verse in the previous purport itself. So this is what he is doing here. And finally he speaks about material and spiritual senses. And he says the relationship with the Lord is never broken, thus there is no grief and no fear. So one who is situated in that unlimited happiness, he has no grief and no fear because he's always connected to the Lord. He always is aware of his relationship with Krishna. Yeah, so one point that Srila Prabhupada writes here is, all the senses, both of the Lord and of the devotees, are without material contamination. So they are so because they are beyond the material cause and effect, as clearly mentioned herein. So the senses of both the Lord and the devotees are without material contamination. This is the pure state. But when the living entity misidentifies himself with the material nature, that his senses are covered and sensual activities are engaged in materialistic activities. When the covering is removed, then the senses are engaged in these pure spiritual activities. So senses are always there. So the living entity is not impersonal. He's not void. It's not that he does not have senses. The living entity has senses, even in the spiritual world. And he's supposed to serve the master of senses. In every way, the authorities have recommended purification of the senses from material conception. Sense gratification, therefore sense gratification is uninterrupted and unbroken because the senses are spiritually purified. Now, this is for that person whose senses are spiritually purified. And such happiness of transcendental quality is called Brahma Saukhyam, which will be clearly described in the 5th canto, right? Naham dejo, naham deho, dehe bhajana loke, kashtan kamana radhe, vidbhujami. Purification of the senses does not automatically arise from knowledge. It is a start, but practice of regulative principles purifies the senses when the senses are engaged in the service of master of senses. This is purification of senses, not mere knowledge of transcendental position without any practice. Okay, so the senses are not purified just with knowledge. The senses are purified by engaging them in devotional service. So those who have attained to this impersonal realization, they are not engaged in actively serving the Lord. Okay, so because their senses are not satisfied, even if they attain impersonal Brahman, they again have to come back. We discussed that in the last class. So senses are purified. So it's not only enough to gain transcendental knowledge, the senses should be purified also. That is why devotional service or bhakti yoga is a must. It is not a choice. The transcendental knowledge is enough. I'll sit and read, but I will not do any service, not work, because the senses are not purified like this. We gain transcendental knowledge, but senses are not purified. Senses can be purified only by rendering service. Okay, so this is important. So devotional service is a must. In such a transcendental state, there is no need of artificial control of the mind, mental speculation or meditation as performed by the Jnanis and Yogis. One gives up such processes as the heavenly king Indra forgoes the trouble of digging a well. Right? Indra does not have to dig a well to get water. He's the demigod of rains. So in such transcendental state, one who has attained that state, there is no need of artificial control of the mind, mental speculation or meditation. In transcendental state, one does not have to endeavor to control the senses or to control the mind. The mind is automatically attached to Krishna, to the Supreme Lord. For Indra, digging a well for water supply is simply ludicrous. Similarly, those who are factually engaged in the loving service of the Lord have attained the ultimate goal of life. And for them, there is no need of mental speculation to find out the true nature of God or His activities. Right? This is also, this is what exactly was discussed by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Prakashananda Saraswati. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came as a sannyasi, as a bhavuka, he was singing and dancing. But Prakashananda Saraswati, he said, you are a sannyasi, you should engage yourself in Vedantic study. Why are you just singing and dancing the holy names of the Lord? Because he had the misconception. He thought that one has to engage in mental speculation to attain to the spiritual realm. But it's not required. One who is engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, he's automatically, for him, there's no need of mental speculation or Vedantic study. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he convinced him through his commentary on the Vedanta Sutras. Commentary basically means his explanation of the Vedanta Sutras. You can consider this commentary of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu on the Vedanta Sutras, some of it. So pure devotees have already achieved the results of mental speculation and meditation. So although they are engaged only in pure devotional service, they have come to the conclusion, they have come to the actual Vedanta, the Anta of all Vedic knowledge. They have already come to Vedanta. So, for them, no need to speculate. So, wherever Srila Prabhupada, wherever he writes speculate, okay, we have to take it as he's speaking about the jnana process. Okay. So, and Prabhupada said philosophical speculation to understand this, because we also did some amount of speculation in the 5th and 6th chapter to understand the Lord's potency, how he creates and all. So, we also engaged our mind and intelligence to understand to some extent these things. So, that is proper, because the goal is to know the Lord. The goal is to glorify how the Lord has created this material world, how everything is Him, and how He has manifested with His potency everything for the living at His benefit, and be grateful to Him, and by understanding, do service to Him. So that way the speculation is allowed. But when Prabhupada speaks about mental speculation here, we have to understand its jnana process. Fruitive activities, karma process. Okay. So Prabhupada's translation is basically translating all these terms also. That's how we should understand. The personality of Godhead is the supreme master of everything auspicious. So this is the Bhagavan feature of the Lord. The personality of God is the supreme master of everything auspicious, because the result of whatever actions are performed by the living being, either the material or spiritual existence, are awarded by the Lord. As such, He is the ultimate benefactor. Every living being and every living entity is unborn. And therefore, even after the annihilation of the material elementary body, the living entity exists, exactly like the sky within the body. Sky within the body, yeah, space within the body, ether. Basically, ether exists everywhere. Air, oh, your version has air within the body, is it?
No, I have sky.
You have sky within the body. Okay. Yeah, it's actually Vyoma. Okay, that actual Sanskrit word is Vyoma. So which should not be ether. Ether basically should not be air. It's not Vayu, it's Vyoma. Okay. So living entity is unborn and eternal. So the living entity is not exhausted even though the material elementary body is vanquished. So this we know from Bhagavad Gita. So many verses are there. In his spiritual life also, the Lord rewards his actions by giving him 5 kinds of liberation. Even the impersonalist cannot achieve the desired merging into the existence of Supreme without being favored by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he also has to engage in devotional service. Even the impersonalist should engage in devotional service. Okay. Yeah. Before we discuss this, and they also have this great temple worship. Engaged in temple worship. In Guruvayur, I think, Guruvayur is all Mayavadis, correct? All the priests in Guruvayur are impersonalist only, completely engaged in worshipping the Lord, so that they will achieve their goal of merging. The living entities are given freedom to make their choice, and the Lord awards them accordingly. So devotees are naturally inclined to become associates of the Lord. Okay, they do not want to merge, simple. Okay, it's mentioned here, right? Since the living being is eternal, he exists just like the sky within the body. Sky is within and without the body. Therefore, when the external covering, the material body is vanquished, the living spark, like the sky within the body, continues to exist. So sky is within the body. And when the living body dies, the sky continues to exist. So similarly, the living entity also continues to exist in that way. We have to say it in that way. The devotees of the Lord should not perform yoga or jnana for attaining the result, namely prema for the Lord. Love of Lord does not get him. Okay. So 50. This is the conclusion, or this is the summary of the 3 chapters which we have been seeing from past how many sessions? I think 6 sessions. This is the 6th one, I think. I don't know how many sessions we have seen. So he says, my dear son, I have now explained in brief the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the creator of the manifested worlds. Without him, Hari, the Lord, there are no other causes of the phenomenal and numinous existences. So he is the cause of all causes. If you remember Narad Muni's question, he says, Yathasrishtam, how it's created, Yadadhishthanam, how it is supported, who maintains it, and all other things, what are the ingredients. Hari, Okay, one word. This is the answer for all your questions. Without him, there are no other causes for phenomenal and numinous existences, both the material and spiritual existence. He is the cause of, he is the answer for everything, basically, of all your questions. Okay, so there is no cause for all these phenomenal activities, but him, Hari, the Supreme Lord, who is the primal cause of all causes. The potency and the potent are simultaneously one and different from one another. So we have discussed these things before. So I will go forward. The Supreme Lord is not responsible, disobedient living entities are. This point also we have discussed several times. The prison house is a necessary institution of the governmental establishment for those who are disobedient to the laws of the government. So because he is the cause of all causes, one should not say that he is the cause of suffering in the material world also by the living entities. No. The facility is given, but you are responsible for your suffering. Correct? So this also is Bhagavad Gita, 13th chapter, correct? Which speaks about Kshetra and Kshetrajna. There Srila Prabhupada writes about this. And he says that although he is the actual Kshetrajna, okay, he is the proprietor of everything, but the result or the activities are actually living entities responsible for his suffering and happiness. Right? There's a verse, one specific verse is there. I want to remember that verse. Karanam Uchyate. It's 13th chapter. It's 13th chapter. Yeah. So the living entity is responsible for his activities. He is the one who suffers and enjoys, and he is the cause for it. So the cause of all causes, the living entity is also cause for his suffering and distress. But the whole setup is given by the Lord. So that way he is cause of all causes. So this should be understood clearly. So it's like the prison house. It's for those who are disobedient to the laws of the government. And not only that, but if they're disobedient, then they create disruption within the whole society. So therefore they are kept separately. So you can go in a separate place and live there. You will be maintained there nicely. Since he has no direct attachment to this material world, he is not to be blamed for its creation. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he says, this summarizes the meaning of 3 chapters. Bhagavan has been described in summary. How is he described? Sat means the effect, the universe in totality. So here, see, Sat Asat, Prabhupada translates as phenomenal and numinous, which is Sat means the manifested world, and Asat is numinous, or we can say as spiritual and material realm. Here, Sat, Vishwanath Thakur writes, as an effect, the universe in totality and its part. Asat means the cause, the jivas. All of this is none other than the Lord, since the Shaktis of Maya and Jiva are non-different from the possessor of the Shakti, and the effects of the Shakti are none other than the Shakti itself. How do they arise from the Lord? The Lord is different from them. Because the Lord is indifferent to these 2 Shaktis, Tatastha and Bahiranga, the Lord has no fault in his relationship to them. Their non-difference will be shown later in the Bhagavatam. So although these are energies of the Lord, he is not directly influenced by them, or he is indifferent to their activities. So that's why the living entity, when he suffers within the material world, the Lord does not suffer. Because this is there, that being a part and parcel, they are suffering. So that kind of suffering is there, or not suffering, but that kind of merciful nature of the Lord is manifested, compassion of the Lord is manifested that way, but he does not suffer the way the living entity suffers. So although he has concern for the living entity, but he does not suffer directly that way. Okay, so 51, 52 and 53, these are the last 3 verses. And here Lord Brahma will give instructions to Narada to preach, saying, now you have heard everything from me, and now you have gained transcendental knowledge. Now you are supposed to go out and preach. That is your duty. O Narada, the science of God, Srimad Bhagavatam, was spoken to me in summary by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and it was spoken as the accumulation of his diverse potencies. Please expand this science yourself. He is referring to the Chatushloki. He is saying it was spoken to me in summary by the Supreme Personality of Godhead in this 4 to 6 verses. Science of God. So Prabhupada writes that The Bhagavatam, spoken by the personality of God in about half a dozen verses, which will appear ahead, is the science of God, and it is the potent representation of the personality of Godhead. The transcendental knowledge of the Supreme Lord is not mental speculation by the mundane wranglers, but is uncontaminated, eternal, perfect knowledge beyond the jurisdiction of the material modes, because it comes from the Lord Himself. The Bhagavad Purana is therefore the direct incarnation of the Lord in the form of transcendental sound, and one should receive this transcendental knowledge from the bona fide representative of the Lord in the chain of disciplic succession from Lord to Brahmaji. It gives the disciplic succession. And unless one hears the science of God, for one to understand the theme of the science of Godhead will be a difficult job. It should never be heard from professional Bhagavatam reciters. So, Srimad Bhagavatam is non-different from the Lord, just like the holy name is non-different from the Lord. So, we should understand that just like there are expansions of the energies of the Lord, Srimad Bhagavatam and the holy name are not expansions of the Lord's energy, but they are the Lord themselves. It's the Lord Himself who comes as the name. The name is not the Shakti of the Lord. The name is the Lord Himself. Just like the deity of the Lord is not the Lord's Shakti, although it's manifested in Ashtadhatu or whatever form or whatever material object it's made, we do not say it's an expansion of the Lord's energy. It's not the energy of the Lord, it's the Lord Himself. The deity of the Lord is Vishnu Tattva Himself. Similarly, it applies to the name of the Lord also, who is not an expansion of His energy, or it's not an energy of the Lord, but it's the Lord Himself. So when we say Hare Krishna, the mantra is chanted, it's the Krishna Himself who is there, who is manifesting in the form of sound. Just like the deity is manifested in the form of wood or form of metal, similarly, the Lord manifests in the form of sound. And Srimad Bhagavatam is the Lord Himself who manifests in the form of text or sound. Okay, it's not an energy of the Lord, it's not Shakti Tattva. Bhagavatam is not Shakti Tattva, it's Vishnu Tattva, it's the Lord Himself. The name is the Lord Himself, the Vishnu Tattva, it's not Shakti Tattva. Okay, just like the deity of the Lord is not Shakti Tattva, it's the Lord Himself. So this we should be very clear. So whenever we are chanting the names of the Lord, okay, it's not that we are pronouncing some sound. It's the Lord Himself who is manifesting. So we should have that consciousness when we are chanting. And when we are reading Bhagavatam also, that's how it is. Srimad Bhagavatam is directly the Supreme Lord Himself. Please describe the science of Godhead with determination and in a manner by which it will be quite possible for the human being to develop transcendental devotional service onto the personality of Godhead Hari, the super soul of every living being, and the Samam Bonam, source of all energies. So with determination, describe the science in a manner which will be possible for human beings to develop transcendental devotional service to Lord Hari, to incite people to invoke their natural devotional feelings for the Lord. Preaching should be done in that manner. Okay, so this is it's a guiding step for those or for us who are supposed to preach. That preaching is meant to invoke a mood of service for the Lord. Prior to the age of Kali, there was no need for such a book of knowledge to know the Lord and His potent energies. But with the beginning of the age of Kali, human society gradually became influenced by four sinful principles, namely illegitimate four regulative principles are broken. And because of the sinful activities, man gradually became forgetful of his eternal relationship with the Lord. For such blind human society, Srimad Bhagavatam is the torchlight. Therefore, it was necessary to describe the science of God from the very beginning or from the very birth of this phenomenal world. Srila Prabhupada writes, scientifically presented. Okay, Bhagavatam is so scientifically presented that any sincere student of this great science will be able to understand the science of God simply by reading it with attention or simply by regularly hearing it from the bona fide speaker. Okay, the science of God can be attained or understood just by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. It is only by His association that we can get free of distressful material existence. By the association with the Lord in any one of His forms, either in the form of His the Srimad Bhagavatam, or form as His devotee, or as His holy name. So text 53, the Lord's activities in association with His different energies should be described. So this is the directions which Lord Brahma is giving to Narad Muni, that his activities, the Lord's activities in association with his different energies should be described, appreciated and heard in accordance with the teachings of the Supreme Lord. If this is done regularly with devotion and respect, one is sure to get out of the illusory energy of the Lord. So Srila Prabhupada will speak about activities in association with different energies. So not only the internal potency, but one should also speak about the Lord's activities with his external potency. Both are important. So I'll read from the purport. The science of learning a subject matter seriously is different from the sentiments of fanatics. Fanatics or fools may consider the Lord's activities in relation with the external energy to be useless for them, which basically means the whole of the material world, materialistic people, they consider that the activities with the external energy to be useless. Oh, no, not only those people, but also those who are sahajiyas, okay, or who take everything cheaply. They also think that the Lord's activities in relation with the external energy is useless for them. And they may falsely claim to be higher participants in the internal energy of the Lord. But factually, the Lord's activities in relation with the external energy and the internal energy are equally good. On the other hand, those who are not completely free from the clutches of the Lord's external energy should devoutly hear regularly about the activities of the Lord in relation with the external energy. They should not foolishly jump up to the activities of the Lord's internal energy, falsely attracted by such activities as is Rasa Leela. The cheap reciters of the Bhagavatam are very much enthusiastic about the activities of the Lord's internal potencies, and the pseudo devotees absorbed in material sense enjoyment falsely jump to the stage of liberated souls and thus fall down deeply into the clutches of the external energy. Okay. So it is imperative, or imperative means it's an order. It's an order, or it must be done. Imperative means something which must be done, or which is understood that it must be done, is to understand the Lord's pastimes or Lord's activities in relation to his external energies. Okay, that is why these topics which we are discussing, we have to go deep, or we have to understand them clearly and understand the glories of the Lord with respect to his external energy, with respect to his creation principles also. We cannot just skip over them. And specifically Prabhupada writes about people getting attracted to Rasa Leela. Okay, and this is very important because the reciters of Srimad Bhagavatam are innumerable even now. If you go to Vrindavan, or not in Mayapur much, but if you go to Vrindavan or nearby places around, there are so many speakers of Srimad Bhagavatam, and they will never speak about the second canto. Okay, there's nothing to speak about second canto in their discussions, because what is happening here is only the Lord creating the principles of Hiranyagarbha, then material creation, then Dravya, Jnana, Karma, how the modes are interacting, Pradhana, Mahatattva, like this. They'll probably speak 5 minutes for the whole of second canto and then move forward. And then about when they come to the 10th canto, they'll speak whole 2 days in their Bhagavad Saptah, 2 days, 3 days only for the 10th canto pastimes, like this. But that is not proper. So that is why professional reciters, if we hear from them, then it's kind of a poison for devotees who want to advance spiritually properly. Because it gives an idea. Why is it sinful? It's only Srimad Bhagavatam, but it's kind of poison because it gives an idea that the Lord's pastimes with his internal potency is more important than the Lord's pastime with his external potency. Okay, and Prabhupada will specifically write in the next paragraph that it's not like this. Both are same. So it's when we hear from professional reciters or those who speak Bhagavatam and they sing very nicely. They have songs for everything and so many, it's very attractive to the ears. I have heard before. I know this. It's very attractive to the ears. Okay. But then it's like a poison because it does not give attraction to the other topics of the Lord. We start distinguishing between the activities of the Lord. We say some activities are more proper or more attractive, while other activities are not attractive. Some activities are more important, other activities are not that important. The Leela of Prahlad Maharaj is not that important, compared to the Leela that the Lord has with his Gopas and Gopis. Similarly for Dhruva Maharaj's narration, the instructions that Kapil Dev gave Devahuti, they are not that important as the relishable rasa dance in the 10th canto. Or the 11th canto details are not important as they are in the 10th canto. Like this, we start making distinctions within our own mind by hearing those pastimes which in our conditioned state look very relishable to us. So therefore, it's always, Prabhupada writes at many places in his purport that we should not hear from professional Bhagavatam reciters for this particular purpose, because it gives a wrong idea, or we start making distinctions within the Lord's pastimes, and that cultivates a tendency of offense, or we basically become distracted. The presentation that comes in disciplic line is this. Brahma is speaking to Narada about these matters. He did speak about Krishna's pastimes, okay, but only 10 verses. Apart from that, he spoke about this, and then he claims that this is Srimad Bhagavatam. He says, after speaking all this, and he says, this Srimad Bhagavatam is what you should propagate to everybody. The supremacy of the Lord distinction of the living entities and the Lord, how he creates this material world, what are his different incarnations, and what are pastimes he performed. He spoke about Dhruva Maharaj's pastime, Nrsimhadeva's pastimes, Vamana's pastimes, Varahadeva's pastimes, and Krishna's pastimes, Ramchandra's pastimes. Those are there. But then it also includes majority of the chapter, 5th and 6th is it's conveying the creation aspect, the Lord's connection with the material energy. Only one chapter of scheduled incarnation, and that too the only 39 verses, they speak about the incarnation of the Lord. Again, the rest of the verses from 40 to 53 speaking about the glories of the Lord, his how he cannot be understood, how he can be understood only by surrender. So the mood that Lord Brahma is speaking to Narada is itself evident, right? Bhagavatam is itself structured in such a brilliant way that it gives us that which we are supposed to hear. In our conditioned state, we are supposed to hear this. This is what is important. Lord's creation pastimes is what is important, because that purifies the heart and it makes it qualified. The heart is purified, and that purification is what is required to hear the pastimes of the Lord with his internal potency, which are conducted under the internal potency, under Yoga Maya. Then only the Lord reveals himself. It's just like this, when the creation happens, then from the subtlest of elements, the grossest of elements are created. Similarly, to understand the Lord, we have to understand the Lord's creation pastimes, which is very near to us. And then from that, we go gradually to the transcendental position, the Brahman, and then to the spiritual realm. Okay. And that's why we see the Lord's pastimes in the Vaikuntha planets are discussed in Bhagavatam first, and then, or rather the forms of the Lord which are then Vaikuntha are discussed first, and finally in the 10th canto it goes to Golok Vrindavan. Right? So first few cantos are speaking about the material realm, what is happening in the material world. Correct? So many things are there. Manvantara incarnations, so many incarnations are there. And then gradually we go to those incarnations of the Lord which have forms in the Vaikuntha planets. And then finally we go to the form of the Lord who is there in Golok Vrindavan in the 10th canto. And then 11th canto also continues that. But there now the marriage is done between the Lord's transcendental instructions and the pastimes of the Lord. Both are there. Instructions to Uddhava, instructions to Vasudeva by Narad Muni. All that comes in the 11th canto. And then finally the 12th canto, the Lord winds up his pastimes. Right? At the end of 11th canto, 12th canto. And then a summary is given in the 12th canto like this. So even it's just like a line, a sutra, just like a thread. We are in the material world, gradually how we go up to the beautiful face of the Lord, how we go up to Golok Vrindavan. The Bhagavatam is structured in that way. Although the pastimes of the Lord are mentioned here and there, it was there in the first canto, it's also here, in 10 verses mentioned here, in the second canto also. But then the actual core or the theme of the whole discussion goes on like this, where the devotee or where the living entity is taken by Bhagavatam from the material world gradually to the transcendental realm, like this. This is how it should be understood. I'll just read his purport. So pure devotee knows that there is no difference between the Lord's Rasa Leela pastimes and his pastimes of creation, maintenance and destruction of the material world. Rather, the descriptions of such activities of the Lord as those performed by the Purushavataras are specifically meant for persons who are in the clutches of external energy. Right? The Purushavataras are specifically mentioned, or the activities of the Lord performed by the Purushavataras are specifically meant for persons who are in the clutches of the external energy. Topics like the Rasa Leela are meant for the liberated souls and not for the conditioned souls. So, and the conditioned souls therefore must hear with appreciation and devotion the Lord's pastimes in relationship with the external energy. And hearing such pastimes is as good as hearing the Rasa Leela in the liberated stage. Okay, so there is no difference. It's a very important point. A conditioned soul should not imitate the activities of the liberated soul. Lord Chaitanya never indulged in hearing the Rasa Leela with ordinary men. So we can see even in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, he used to relish the pastimes of Dhruva Maharaj and Prahlad Maharaj a lot more when he's with his other devotees, with all his associates. And only when he was his close associate like Swarup Damodar and Ramananda Rai, he used to hear or he used to relish the pastimes of Rasa Leela or the pastimes of Lord Krishna with his gopis. Correct. You know that, right? It's there in Ante Leela. It's mentioned, Chaitanya Charitamrita. So Lord Chaitanya never indulged in hearing the Rasa Leela with other devotees, other of his associates. Although they are pure devotees of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but still he never indulged in hearing this. He indulged, or rather, he engaged in hearing the pastimes of Dhruva Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, Narsimhadev, like this. So this is to set an example. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is setting an example for all the devotees. So Srila Prabhupada is speaking about himself or what he intends to do, writes this paragraph. We'll read this. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Science of God, the first 9 cantos prepare the ground for hearing the 10th canto. This will be further explained in the last chapter of this canto, okay, where it comes, the first 10 subject matters of a Purana is mentioned, and there are several topics which will mention this. We will discuss that. In the 3rd canto, it will be more explicit. A pure devotee of the Lord, therefore, must begin reading or hearing Srimad Bhagavatam from the very beginning and not from the 10th canto. We have several times been requested by some so-called devotees to take up the 10th canto immediately, but we have refrained from such an action because we wish to present Srimad Bhagavatam as the science of Godhead, and not as a sensuous understanding for the conditioned souls. This is forbidden by such authorities as Sri Brahmaji. Right? This is what we discussed. Brahma asked to explain Srimad Bhagavatam as he has explained to Narad Muni, which contains majority only his creation pastimes. By reading and hearing Srimad Bhagavatam as a scientific presentation, the conditioned souls will gradually be promoted to the higher status of transcendental knowledge after being freed from the illusion energy based on sense enjoyment. So, this is what we are supposed to do. Gradually uplift our consciousness from the material realm to the spiritual realm by seeing the Lord in his material pastimes, or rather the pastimes that he conducts in the material realm, starting from creation, starting from his avatars, and then gradually rise our consciousness to the level of the spiritual world, Goloka Vrindavan basically. Okay, thus end the Bhakti-vaibhava purports of the 2nd canto, 7th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Scheduled Incarnations with Specific Functions. Okay, so any questions you have? Do you have any questions? Find it? No questions, okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaur Premanandi.